the day when you can tell your landlord bye, bye, and buy your own home. It doesn't have to be a dream, you can make it, oh yes, even. Duo will show you the way to home ownership. This is where your dream comes true. This is where you learn what to do to own your home and start living American dream. When you can tell your realtor, Stephen Dale will help you make it happen. Tired of venting and just throwing your money away? Dream of the day when you can tell your landlord bye, bye, and buy your own home. It doesn't have to be a dream, you can make it, oh yes, even. Duo will show you the way to home ownership. This is where your dream comes true. This is where you learn what to do to own your home and start living American dream. When you can tell your realtor, Stephen Dale will help you make it happen.
Hello, hello. This is Steve Dow with Keller Williams First Choice Realty. And I'm super excited to be with you here tonight because I know that what you're going to learn tonight can be life changing. I have sat at the closing table with people who thought they could not buy their own home, who found out they could and did, and it changed their lives. So let's get right on into it. All right, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of things. We're going to get right into how you can buy with no money down. Now, there's a couple ways, actually, you can do this. Maybe even 3 ways. You're probably familiar with what's called a VA loan, and that is strictly for veterans. But the vast majority of people are not veterans. And so, if you do not have that distinction, you too can buy with no money down. The first way is through a rural housing RHS loan. Now, the rural housing loan is also called sometimes a USDA loan. That is the same thing. It is a government-backed loan. It has a fixed 30-year interest rate, no balloon payment, no prepayment penalty. Very straightforward loan with very good terms. Now, a couple things. You do need a 640 credit score, which about 80% of all Americans have at least a 640, okay? And the house needs to meet certain requirements. Among those requirements is everything has to be in working order. You can't buy something that needs repairs with this loan. The reason for that, they don't want to set you up to fail. If you're a first-time home buyer and you've got all these expenses, you may feel overwhelmed and give up and let the house repossess. And that is not what this loan is all about. This loan wants to put you on the right path for prosperity. So the house has to have everything in working order. Every bedroom must have a heat source. If steps are more than 18 inches tall, they must have a hand railing. If there is a crawl space, then there has to be at least 18 inches in that crawl space. And that is in case you ever have to go into the house for repairs 10 years from now. You're not going to have to excavate to get under there and have a big expense. Okay. But there's also now wait a minute before I forget. The rural housing loan is available through most of Kentucky, like Glasgow, Mumfordville, Brownsville, Morgantown, Russellville. All those places will qualify. However, the city of Bowling Green is not rural, so that will not qualify. Now back where I'm from, Somerset would still qualify and does. But Bowling Green, Lexington, Louisville, sorry, that's my dog, Louisville, maybe Owensboro, Elizabethtown, those places will not qualify in the city limits. However, you get out into the outer layers of Warren County, and there are places that will qualify. But let's say you really want to live in the city of Bowling Green. Now, why wouldn't you? It's great. I love it. I love it here. Kentucky Housing Corporation, KHC, has down payment assistance. Now, this is not a grant. It's basically a second mortgage. But what it provides is up to $12,500 to go toward your down payment, closing costs, prepaid taxes, and insurance. And while I'm on that subject, before I forget, this is extremely important. I have seen real estate deals fall apart because the buyer asked the seller to pay the closing costs, and that's pretty standard. But when the offer was written, the agent put seller will pay up to, let's say, $5,000 in closing costs. And that's how it was worded. And that did not include prepaids. Your prepaids are your taxes and insurance. And that can cost $1,500 to $3,000. And a lot of times, the buyer didn't have that. And the seller wasn't going to pay it at that point. And the deal fell apart. When if the offer had just been written to say prepaids, or closing costs and prepaids, everything would have been fine. So if you're not working with me, shame on you. Make sure your agent knows to write closing costs and prepaids if you're asking the seller to pay those for you. And that's pretty common. So, again, the down payment assistance will help you buy a home with no money down. But it's not a grant like the Welcome Home Grant. It does have to be paid back in sometimes If you stay in the home and you don't resell it after a few years, you can get some loan forgiveness on that, but you need to check with your loan officer to see how that would work. Okay? And it's usually paid back over 15 years. So the payment's very small. Now, for that, you don't need a 640 credit score. You can get by on a 620 credit score. You must meet the income limits, and it's not that you make enough. In this case, it's usually that you don't make too much. The home has to be your primary residence. You can't use this to buy an investment property. Okay? And of course, you must use a Kentucky Housing approved lender. Okay. Now, this next item we're going to discuss can literally save you tens of thousands of dollars on a home purchase. Okay? If you've decided you want to make the jump from renting to owning, the first thing, write this down, that you must do is get pre-approved. And here's why. It is not for my convenience or so that I don't waste my time with you. If you go and look at a house and you do not have a pre-approval, you have no leverage in negotiations with that home seller. And the likelihood of them coming down on the price when they don't know you can back it up is highly unlikely. So right there, you can save a few $1,000s by getting pre-approved, because then it's just like you have cash. Okay? And money talks. And so the buyer, he respects you, the seller respects you, listens to you, and knows that you can do what you say. So they become much more willing to negotiate at that point. But where you really save the money is if you make an offer on a house and you go to a loan officer and you say, I need a loan, I'm buying a house, I want to buy this house. Well, guess what? Your fees and your interest rate over a 30-year loan just went up because they got you. You don't have time. You're under contract. You don't have time to go get the best deal on a home loan. You need them, and they need a big payday. So your closing costs are going to go up. Your interest rate is going to go up. And even if it just goes up 1/4 of a point, that is a substantial amount of money over a 30-year loan, especially with home prices where they are today. So the first thing you got to do is get pre-approved. Okay? And listen, don't sweat it. If you're going to become a homeowner, you're going to have to talk to the bank at some point. You might as well go ahead and, as we say in real estate, swallow the frog and get over with, get it done, and be sure of what you can do. And not only that, but I've seen so many people go out, fall in love with a home, and then find out there's no way that they could buy that home. And it just ruins the entire experience. Very seldom do they ever go ahead and get a house at that point. And if they do, they're not happy with it. And so an experience that should be exciting and wonderful and just full of joy is robbed. You're robbed of all that. So getting the pre-approval will not only save you money, it'll make you happy. Okay, once you have that locked down, it is time to do the most exciting, fun thing in the whole process. And that is look at homes. Now I'm going to tell you something you may not like, but it's for your own good. When you go look at homes, do not look at more than 3 at one time. So I've seen people, they want to schedule 12 in a day. And if you do that, you're going to be thoroughly confused. Everything's going to run together. You're not going to remember which house had what. One of the things I do when I'm showing houses is I have a folder with all the paperwork and the pictures, all that, so that when you get home at night, you can kind of piece it all together and remember this house had this house was that. So it's a little bit easier, but trust me, 3 a day. Now you can, of course, look at more homes before you make a decision, but 3 at a time. If you do that, you can process what you're seeing. You don't get overwhelmed and confused, and you make the best decision for you and your family. And that's what we got to make sure happens. We got to make sure that you're not caught up in emotion and that you're thinking logically and reasonably, and you're doing what is best for your family, not only for today, but next year and the year after. This is going to change your life more than you may even realize. It's a milestone in your life, especially your first home. And it's like when you got married or you had a child. It's that big of a change. And it's one of the greatest experiences in life. When I bought my first home, it made such a difference in my self-esteem, my self-worth, my confidence, my belief in my abilities. It's an amazing transformation. When you pull up in that driveway and you say, I did this. I did this. It's worth so much more than I can tell you. Okay. Let's see now. Once you have found the home that you're seriously considering, here's how you will know if it's the right one, if it's the one. Ask yourself this question. If you don't make an offer while you're there, and you go home to think about it, and you decide that night you want to buy that house, and your agent tells you, I'm sorry, it went under contract last night, how will you feel? Now, if you can say, well, that's just the way it goes, that is not the home for you. But if you would say, oh, man, I missed out, I really wanted that home, that's your home. And it's time to make your offer. Now, when you go to make your offer, of course, you want to get the best deal. Give me just a second. So, we need to look at, on the listing agreement, listing paperwork, what is the DOM, days on market. Okay? If it's less than 30, those sellers are probably still thinking they can get their price, especially if they're having showings. So, coming in with a lowball offer is probably going to cost you. Because if you make the seller mad and they don't want to deal with you, I've seen this hundreds of times, then they're not as generous in negotiations than if you come in with a reasonable offer. You want to look at the comps and the price per square foot. That price per square foot is extremely important because that's what they're going to base the appraisal on. You also, of course, have to consider special features like, does this home have a big auxiliary garage in the back? It probably costs $30,000. Is there a basement? Is there a fence? Those are all things that can raise the value. But to structure your offer competitively, you really want to look at price per square foot. And that days on market will tell you how generous the seller may be in coming down on that price. Okay? Now, sorry, somebody's outside. Earnest money is extremely important. And most first-time home buyers do not have a clue about earnest money or how it works or the importance of it. Now, first of all, earnest money is not an extra fee. Okay? I have seen in multiple offer situations many times a seller make their decision not necessarily based on the offer price, but on the earnest money. So, if you're paying a down payment, then you want to put down earnest money. If you're not paying a down payment, it's still really good if you can put some earnest money down. Don't worry. If you're doing no money down, you will get the earnest money back at the closing table. Earnest money is a good faith deposit to show the seller, hey, I'm serious. Sometimes you can negotiate a better price because you've got a good earnest money deposit. Okay? So that money goes into the realtor's broker's escrow account, and it sits there until the closing. You can't get it back. The seller cannot get it back. The realtors cannot touch it until the closing. And then at the closing, like I said, if you're not making a down payment, you get it back. If you are making a down payment, it goes towards your down payment. So if you're putting $5,000 down, that's a down payment, and you pay $2,500, for example, in earnest money, then on the day of the closing, you just need to bring $2,500 with you. Now, the only way you would lose this money is if you break the contract and you say, "Hey, I've changed my mind. I'm not doing it." Well, then the seller gets to keep that because they took their home off the market so no one else can buy it. So it does lock the home in for you so that you don't lose the home. Most realtors don't do this. But if I'm the listing agent and you make a full price or even above full price offer, but you didn't put any earnest money down, we're not taking that house off the market for you. I don't care what your offer is, because 99% of deals with no earnest money fall apart, especially if it's a first-time home buyer, because they get cold feet and there's no consequence for backing out, so they just back out. Okay. You want to make sure that your offer is contingent upon a clear title, which means if they're not giving you a clear title, you don't buy the house. Because you may not know this, but if you buy a house and there's a lien against it, and that lien does not get cleared, you now owe that money, even though you didn't borrow it, because the lien runs with the land, not the man. Yeah, so make sure your offer is contingent upon a clear title. You want a home inspection. Now, home inspections are not $1,000, but even if they were, they're money well spent. Even if it's a brand new home, you want a home inspection. My second deal in real estate was a brand new home. When they did the inspection, they found out the builder had cut corners, literally, and there was no foundation under a corner of the house. So, I've also had situations where buyers tell me, "I don't need an inspection. I know this person. I'm related to this person. I work with this person. I don't need it. I'll save that money." And they were very sorry after the fact. I've never seen anyone not get an inspection who did not regret it. Okay. And then, of course, you want to make your offer contingent, and this is very important, upon satisfactory financing. A lot of times, offers are written up to just say, you're approved. Well, you may be approved, but at what interest rate You just go in thinking you're in straight 6, and before it closes, you're in straight 7, and that throws your payment up more than you're comfortable. That is not satisfactory financing. You're financed, but not at a rate you're comfortable with. So make it contingent upon satisfactory financing. Very important. Everything is so important, and words matter in real estate. So you have to be very careful. Okay. You want to be sure that you get a copy of the deed, and you look at it, or your agent looks at it, and verifies the deed description and the size of the property. There are sellers who claim the property's 2 acres when it's 1. And it's not always because they're trying to cheat. Sometimes they just don't know. We had a situation where a lady called one of my agents out to list her property with 40 acres. An elderly lady, she'd lived there for decades. And she really believed she had 40 acres. I trained my agents to always get a copy of the deed when they list a property. He goes to the courthouse, gets a copy. It's 4 acres. Her husband bought the property. He'd passed away. I don't know if he told her that to make her feel proud or what the situation was. But she had 4. And had we listed that as 40 and nobody checked up on it, we would have had a mess. So always check that. If you're buying acreage and the deed description is not clear, because a lot of those older ones are not, you need a survey. And you can negotiate for the seller to pay for it, because with a deed like that, they're going to have a hard time selling the property. So you've got some leverage there to get them to do that. We've already talked about never, under any circumstance, forgo an inspection. If an inspection shows water in the crawl space, and I would say 20 to maybe 40% does show water in the crawl space, that is a major concern. But it is typically a very easy, cheap fix. Walk around the house, check the gutters and the downspouts, and make sure that they're directing water away from the house. This past Saturday, I had an open house, and I went out to the backyard to video it for a customer, and I looked over at the house beside of us, and their splash guards were turned around backwards. And what that does is that creates like a dam that holds that water, and then it shoots back under the house. Well, over time, water will erode concrete, and if it gets into the crawl space, then you've got mold issues, and that's expensive and not safe. So Always be sure that you're checking that when you look at the property. Okay? Because if it's needing to be fixed, it's going to take a few weeks for that crawl space to dry out. So you want to go ahead and get on top of that at the time of offer. All right. You want to always get a title search. Now, if you're financing, the bank's going to arrange that. You don't have to worry. But you want that title search because that shows you there's no liens other than their mortgage, and that's going to be paid off in the transaction. So you're getting a free and clear deed with only your mortgage against the property. Because remember, if there's a lien, you inherit the lien. All right, let me see where I got to. Once the title search is done, you will likely close in 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, here's just some information for you. Listen to me closely. Never, ever buy a home on land contract. More than 90% of those end with the buyer losing everything. I have seen people pay on a home for years and through no fault of their own lose the house. Unscrupulous sellers sell the home. Maybe they die, and the people that inherit the house won't honor the contract. And it's just a mess. If your credit is horrible, if you will keep your nose clean for 2 years, or 3 if you've had a home repossessed, then you can buy another home on a regular mortgage without a huge interest rate. Okay? So don't go for these predatory loans. That is why the housing crash of 2008 happened. There were all these homes that had been sold on predatory loans, and the people couldn't pay them, and they lost them. And that is why the Rural Housing Loan came into being. It's a great loan, very straightforward, and it sets you up for success, not failure. That's why, like we said, the home can't need any repairs, because that may put financial hardship on you. Okay? More than 90% of the real estate lawsuits are where there was no agent involved. Now, I'm going to leave that right there. What does that tell you? If you're looking at a for sale by owner, you need to make sure everything's being done correctly. All right, last point. The 3 biggest regrets home buyers tell me after the closing. 1, buying too small. A first-time home buyer is scared to death. It's a big jump, and understandable. They're nervous. So oftentimes they go way below what they can afford just to feel safe. and I get it. But you've got to also be comfortable. And you're going to see pretty quickly that your fear was unjustified. And you can do this. You can. If you qualify, if the lender has said you qualify for 200, you can afford 200. Now, just a second. That payment may be a lot more than you're paying in rent. And it may scare the bejeebies out of you. But here's what you'll find. It's just like when you have a kid. Your spending habits will change. And you will not waste near the money that you did before. And so, they say you can buy 200. You can buy 200. You don't need to sell for 150. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean you can go 220 or 230. But they tell you 200, 250, whatever. You can feel safe at that range. They're not going to set you up for failure. Okay? That used to happen. It does not since the housing crash. When that housing crash happened in 2008, the government stepped in and changed a lot of things, okay, about the home buying process on the lending side, because a lot of lenders were the cause of that. Okay. Second mistake, ignoring the commute. You do not want to spend your life in a traffic jam. So pay attention to the commute and look at homes that are going to make your life easier, not more difficult. And the last one, and very few people ever think of this, but they're upset they did not check the neighborhood at night. If you're seriously considering moving into a neighborhood, you want to go through on a Friday night, a Saturday night, and just drive through between 8 and 11. And you're going to get a really good idea of how peaceful that neighborhood really is. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. I hope it was a blessing to you. And let me just tell you, I want your business. If you've decided that you want to make the jump to home ownership, I would be proud and honored to show you homes and to take good care of you. And I don't care if you're looking at $500,000 or $50,000. I will give you the same excellent service regardless. One of the things I'm most proud of in my life is helping people make the transition to home ownership. And I would love to do that for you. So if you're tired of renting, give Stephen Dell a call, 606-425-3640.
Tired of renting and just throwing your money away. Dream of a day when you can tell your landlord right.